If there's one thing you should remember from Army of Darkness, it's Hail to the King, baby. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new segment of The Final Cut. Today I'm going to be going over Army of Darkness from 1993. This is the conclusion of the Evil Dead trilogy. This was actually the first Evil Dead film I saw, and I had no idea it was a sequel to Evil Dead. I was aware of the Evil Dead movies, I just never saw them, and I saw Army of Darkness on HBO when I was younger. And yeah, I didn't know till years later that, oh my god, that Ash is the same guy from Evil Dead 1 and 2, until I watched the earlier films, and I was just like, wow. Part of that is because Universal Studios was involved, and they basically wanted this to stand on its own, which kind of is a bummer because Sam Raimi wanted to call it The Medieval Dead, and that would have been more badass, let me tell you. But yeah, Sam Raimi returns to direct this, and Bruce Campbell stars as Ash Williams. And it pretty much starts off where Evil Dead 2 left off. He's in medieval times, and he has to figure out a way to go back home. This is a very big movie. It's very different too because he's not confined into the cabin. It's open world now. And also, it's in a different time period, and there's much more comedic kind of fantasy moments here. There's not that many horror moments, but you do have many kind of grotesque monsters and horrific moments. There's also certain nods to like Jason and the Argonauts with like the skeletons moving around. It has a very B-movie classical horror feel to it. And that's what's part of the charm of the series, really, you know? It's done in a way where it's cheesy, it's slapstick, but there's a certain art behind it that doesn't make it, horrible. It's actually good. It's actually fun. Something different, something original. You can definitely tell Sam Raimi has a certain film style he has in all three of these films. And it's nice to see it kind of expand with each installment. This is a bit of a step down from Evil Dead 2, but it's still a great time, and it's very different for a horror film, I must say. Again, it's comedic, but it's also like fantasy-oriented, You had films like Beastmaster and so many other fantasy films in the 80s that this is like the early 90s. And this was actually supposed to come out in 1992, and Universal shelved it because Dino De Laurentiis was still a producer. There are certain rights over the sequel to Manhunter, which is Hannibal Lecter. They're making Silence of the Lambs. So they held the film for a year, heavily edited, and changed the ending. So there's different cuts of this film going around, such as a director's cut, international cut, or the theatrical. But with the TV show, the theatrical cut's ending is the only one that's kind of considered canon. But the TV show does pay its homage to the director's cut of this. The best way to say, if you are able to see all the versions, the director's cut is more like Evil Dead 3. Theatrical cut is Army of Darkness. And I do love this film. Bruce Campbell is a very different Ash. He's just like zany, crazy, just egotistical. He's the type of guy who can be a leader and very smart at times, but then do something very idiotic and just gets everybody in trouble, But that's the beauty of Ash's character. He's flawed that way, He's the guy where you can count on him to fight some deadites, but at the end of the day, he's gonna screw something up and be human, There's a flaw there, and that's what makes him such a compelling character. Bruce Campbell does a fantastic job in this film as this character. He also plays an evil Ash. There's a version of evil Ash and then all these like mini little Ashes. Yeah, it kind of goes into the borrowers in a bit with like the mini Ashes and London Bridge is falling down sequence. Besides Bruce Campbell, we also have Embeth Davidtz as Sheila, Marcus Gilbert as Lord Arthur, Ian Abercrombie as Wise Man, Richard Grove as Duke Henry the Red, and Bridget Fonda as Linda. And we get to see Linda in the flashbacks, much like the recaps that were redone in Evil Dead 2, and she was supposed to have a larger part in the film, but ultimately we get to know about Ash and where he works in the real world. He worked at somewhere called an S-Mart, which by the way is a set of stores in Mexico, but that's his job basically. He was working at a local S-Mart. And we get to learn more about his backstory, but also it's very different in the way that it's kind of different from how it continues from Evil Dead 2. It doesn't have that dark look, it's very bright, but also the way he meets the knights is very different. He's basically enslaved at the beginning, and he has to fight someone called the Pit Bitch. Basically, it's like a deadite. Anyway, he shows him his boomstick, his shotgun, shoots him, and they think he's like this powerful, like, knight, basically. Like, he's a savior that fell from the heavens to fight these deadites. So we get to learn more about the lore of who these monsters are from the Book of the Dead. And ultimately, he has to find a way to get the Book of the Dead, the missing pages, defeat them, and find a way back home. And that's pretty much the gist of Army of Darkness. There's some fantastic special effects here. Again, stop motion was still used. It's very old school practical effects. That final battle with the skeletons is just amazing. I love that stuff. I love Evil Ash, where he actually has an eyeball on his arm and it's like splitting from his body. That was very grotesque, and it also gets to show you how great of an actor Bruce Campbell is. You know, he's always in comedic, funny moments. He's basically playing Bruce Campbell, but he can go dark when he wants to, and that's one great thing about the second and third Evil Dead films is you get to see him kind of go dark and go crazy. You get to see more of that in the television show. But Army of Darkness is still a blast, and I would give it a 3 out of 5 and a B+. It is a fun B movie, and it's a solid conclusion to the Evil Dead trilogy. Like, really, it's not as good as the first two. There's a lot of intervention. It's sad because Sam Raimi has a history of this with Darkman and Spider-Man 3, that if you just let him do his thing, you can have great movies. But when there's interference, it's just kind of frustrating. Because you can definitely see there's parts that are missing, more heartfelt moments, more drawn out moments for character and story. But overall, this is the third of a trilogy, a conclusion, and it's action-packed and it's great. In this version, he goes back to the S-Mart, but there's a Deadite. He defeats it, and it's Hail to the King, baby. He's a king in present day. He gets the girl, and it's a happy ending. And I love that ending. Such an action-packed ending with like the zoom cuts and the Dutch angles and quick, fast-pacedness of it. But then there's also another ending where he makes this potion. He's supposed to fall asleep and wake up in present day. What? Ash screws up, as always, and he wakes up too far into the future, and it was supposed to be a fourth film about a post-apocalyptic world filled with Deadites and Ash fighting for survival. Both endings are fantastic, but like I said, the director's cut with the apocalyptic ending feels more like Evil Dead 3, and the other one's Army of Darkness. But if you're going to watch the TV show, the theatrical cut of Army of Darkness is canon because that's where the TV show launches from, like 20 years later. So it's interesting to say the least. I like the actors in it. His love interest, it is a bit kind of fast in the way they fall in love, but I love the actress. She was in Matilda as the teacher. She's Peter Parker's mother in the Amazing Spider-Man films with Andrew Garfield. And yeah, I like it. It's just like a fun adventure film that's filled with fantasy horror elements. And I respect it for doing something completely different than the other two. So yeah, even though it may not level up to the horror of the first two Evil Dead films, it still makes the final cut. It still does something on its own and ends the trilogy strongly. So that's my thoughts on Army of Darkness. If you haven't checked out the Evil Dead series, I highly recommend it. But if you have checked out Army of Darkness, let me know some of your favorite moments. What's your favorite Evil Dead film? Just let me know in the comments below. You can also follow me on the Stardust app at Fred Film Fanatic. Like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. You can also check out these other amazing groovy videos on my channel. Till next time.